Well, thank you everybody for your time. What I want to do today as a part of this recording is essentially to show you how you start organizing and running your own projects on the tool. And like Carl mentioned in his slide, there is a system administrator level of control, which is not part of this. This is if you want to run your own projects. The first thing that I want to share with you is this website, geodesignsupport.com, and it is a very comprehensive site that we've built essentially with all the articles that you would need for getting started on the project. So if you go to any of these subcategories, you will see questions and answers and kind of a step-by-step guide as to how you do this. But that's not for today, because I'm going to tell you exactly how to do this. The first thing to kind of point out in this case is the fact that this entire website starts off with a grid of empty boxes, and there is really nothing else to it. Like Carl mentioned, Allison and Rosanna created the maps. The participants who came to the workshops created the individual diagrams and synthesized them, and kind of did the comparisons. So when you start a workshop or a project, it is completely empty. And I'm just on my screen, you can see a completely empty screen where you have some requirements. The diagrams screen is empty, and everything else is kind of nothing is filled out. So that's the most important thing to remember. When a project is started, you start off at zero. And the whole idea for this is to be able to use your own data, your own models, your own infrastructure when you do these projects. Now, I'm going to go back to my profile page. So once you have a profile, you should, as you can see there, I have some projects that I have already done. You would probably not have it on your profile. I'm going to start with the administration screen for the Savannah project. And this assumes that you have filled out the spreadsheet that Carl demonstrated earlier. So you have a way to figure out all the 10 systems. You have an idea of how the evaluation maps will look like, and you have also filled out the impact tables. Now, all of this can be done here, but we use that spreadsheet traditionally to help you get started with thinking about the project and do it offline and not into the tool. Now, if I click launch here, I am the project coordinator. So in my screen here, you will see the administration screen. So if somebody else joins the project, they won't see this. The first thing to note is the getting others invited to the project. So on my screen here, there is an invite button which I can click, and I can either send their emails and an optional message, or send this join link, which essentially if they click, they'll be asked to create a profile, and then they join the project, and it will be on their screen as well. When you have a study area in mind, the first thing to do is to set the project area. And in this case, it's in Savannah, since we're using the Georgia study as an example. And I can pan and move this map around to set the study area. So what this is essentially a 300 pixel by 300 pixel square that is kind of used in the grid that you will see in the coming screens. So you can zoom and pan this to kind of set it just right the way you want it. And once you set it, that's the starting point for all the maps in the grid. You can of course zoom in and out to it, but this helps in setting your project study area. The other thing to note here is that along with this black and white map that you're seeing, the tool also provides a satellite image for no cost, or for free basically. So you have a black and white and a satellite image, and I'm going to show you how to add your own data to it as we go on. Now, let's assume that you have some requirements in place. So in this case, we have for Georgia all the requirements. The way to add a requirement is go to the Manage Requirements panel, and then you click on Add a Requirement. And then it will ask you, what is the type of a requirement? Is it an attractiveness type requirement or a vulnerability type? And this is, again, something to be discussed during the project setup phase. Then you select what kind of requirement it represents. Is it a small building, large building, paved roads, porous agriculture, things like that. So it kind of, you're giving a tag or classifying a requirement as a certain type, and then you have to name your requirement. The other thing to note here is that because of the really tight screen sizes, we use a lot of abbreviations. So in this case, you have to abbreviate the name of the requirement to 6 characters, and you will see why as we go ahead. And once I select a requirement, let's say high density housing, I click on add requirement, and this will appear here. In this case, because we are reviewing the Georgia workshop, we already had the 10 systems or the 10 requirements defined. So they are climate, ecology, surface water, groundwater, history and culture, tourism, agriculture, forestry, housing, commercial industry, and transport. The second thing to note here is that every system is configurable. Now I can rename a requirement, so I can enter a new name if I wanted to. The other thing to note here is that I can add a target. So sometimes you have, for your design, by law, some targets that are required. For example, you may require 20,000 new housing units or 500 hectares of new housing, or whatever the project is. You can add a requirement, a target for that. So in this case, for the Chatham County, we had set about a target of 16,500 hectares for commercial and industry. And of course, you can change it at any time during the course of the study. So a lot of what I'm saying is to be done before you get the people into the workshop, but it can obviously be changed during the workshop. The second thing to note here, which is kind of goes back to the diagram that Carl showed. What the tool does is enables you to link your own models to it. So we think of it as in 2 ways to kind of run a study. So one is what I would call as a simplified mini model, which is what are the maps that Alison and Rosanna created. And then at the same time, you can run and connect your own model running on your server, maybe in a lab or computer lab or somewhere that will dynamically update it and linking to the software. So the way to do that is to hit this dynamic evals button or the dynamic impacts button. And so you can have an impact model running outside of the software or an evaluation model as well. And when I click that, I have to select the external model data. And then there are 3 ways you can link it. One is the post request. So you can actually have somebody post a GeoJSON data into the system so that it will be displayed in real time. You can have a WMS layer associated with it, and a web feature service as well. So you can do either one as you wish for external computing. So you have really 3 ways to process and send your data into the tool as the design process goes on. The other thing to note here is that you will see in the coming minutes this concept of constraints. And what constraints is essentially a way which you are constraining the design process by saying that these areas are not to be touched. Now, the interesting thing about constraints is that you may have systems where the constraints do not apply, and maybe you don't want it to be applied. So what you have here is essentially you can set on a per system basis if you want to enable constraints calculations for that or not. So this is something interesting when you set up the study as well. And finally, the other thing to note here is the administrator. So every system has its own administrator. So you can imagine you have a collaborator somewhere across the world who may be an expert in the climate system. And so you can add him or her to the system, and then he or she can run their own models and submit updates and things like that. So the system is kind of sandboxed in itself, and you can control that through here. The other thing to note here is the colors. As you can imagine, the colors play a very, very important role in the whole workshop series. The system colors are set over here. So if I click on the color square here, this palette shows up where I can choose the color. Now we've kind of put 16 colors in there, but the idea is to have these set on a per system basis, and obviously you don't want the colors repeating. We have to kind of set it to 1 and then the idea is to not change it once the design starts. So these have to be set beforehand. So the recommendation here is essentially to set the colors before the study and don't change it during the study, because these are totally linked to the design and comparisons and things like that. So as a best practice, I would say that do not change it once the study has started. There are a few other settings that you can use when you set up the project. The first is the impacts. As you can see, once you have the 10 requirements, this is exactly similar to the Excel spreadsheet that Carl demonstrated. And what you then do is for each of the requirements that you have already set up the impacts on the Excel spreadsheet, all you have to do is just do the following, which is to select, looking at your spreadsheet, the correct impacts. And you go through this process for all the 10 requirements and set them. As you probably would have figured out by now, there are two types of impacts. One is the impact assessment, and then the second one is the cross-systems impacts, which updates the evaluation maps depending on how systems interact with each other, and that those connections are set over here. So what we're setting over here is how the ecology requirement interacts with the other 9, and you do that basically using the spreadsheet that you saw there. There is 3D as well, which we're not going to go into at the moment. The other thing that the spreadsheet has, which Carl did not discuss, was costs. Since you have requirements grouped by requirement type, you can actually set up a per hectare cost for this. And there's a very simple, extremely simple cost model associated with the tool, and you can actually take out all the designs and run your own financial modeling on it. But just to get started, there is a very simple cost model associated with it. You can add and remove users. You can add an administrator. So in this case, you can see that only Carl and I are the 2 users of this project, and I am the administrator. You can have change teams. At the moment, we have ecology and a developers group as a change team, and you can add and remove users from this. The other interesting thing that you can do here is add external layers. So in a lot of cases, there is external data available from various state or local authorities. And as long as that data is available as a GIS or as a publicly consumable layer, it can be added over here. In this case, you can add a map server, GeoServer, an ArcGIS server, degree server, any of the standard layers that you have available can be added here. It's a WMS. You give it a URL and give it a layer name, and you can add the external layers. And you can do the same with the feature server in the same way. So these are essentially design aids that you can overlay on top of the drawing and editing tools to help you, the users, design their diagrams. And that's really it as far as the administration of the project is concerned. So the idea is you fill out that spreadsheet. Once that spreadsheet is filled out, you come here, add the requirements, do the settings such as setting the colors, connecting the requirements and the impacts, set the costs, and if possible, do the change teams as well. Get people invited to the project, and then you're set to go. So that is where the administration side of it from a tool point of view ends. And I'm going to switch to the diagrams page now. And what you're going to see is essentially the diagram and the data that was created in the workshop in Georgia. As you can see here, in the diagrams page, the first thing I see is I'm part of the dev team and I am the conductor, and I can add other people in the team to join me, and these obviously can be sitting next to me or across the world since this is all done online. This is the decision model. At the moment it is not set, but you can set it, and I'm going to show you how. First thing you want to do is to do a priority for all the 10 systems, and I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so that you can see the 10 systems here, and I can hover over them, and that's the evaluation layers, and these are the maps that were built by Allison and Rosanna using standard GIS tools, and maybe some non-standard, because we have had maps built by agent-based models, things like that in other workshops. So I'm going to just hover over the ecology, and I can pan my map and zoom it, so as you can see over here. And these are created by GIS, as you can see here. You can switch between the base map and the satellite map, as you saw me set up the project area. And then I can also do an existing land use. And so this map was kind of integrated using the tool that I just showed you, where you can switch between these three, and you can obviously add more. The other thing with these evaluation maps is you can do simple overlays. Now, what I'm going to do is show you these evaluation maps for these 10 systems overlaying on top of each other. So I have climate, ecology, surface water, groundwater, and historic and cultural system, and the tourism, and the agriculture and forestry. So as you can see, by selecting these controls, I can add and remove these. So you have, in the same way, housing, commerce, and transport. And then finally, you have this constraints map. And so this constraints map is worth investigating a little bit more, and I can talk in detail very soon. And so in this way, you can see the 10 evaluation layers. And I'm just going to zoom in into the constraints map. Again, this was created by Allison. And what this is essentially the boundary of the city. And you can imagine it to be fairly detailed, and we've had very detailed constraints map in other projects as well. But essentially, what you're saying is, do not touch this area for my design. And you can have any number of such features in there. The other thing to do here is to set the decision model before we get into the design. So as you might have imagined, there are about 6 teams, or we recommend having 6 change teams. And this happens to be one of them, the developers team. So I'm going to set my decision model as into the tool. And what this is essentially prioritizing one requirement, one system over the rest. So I'm going to say I value the commerce and industry more, obviously, because I'm a developer. Transportation is important to me. Housing is important to me. The rest, the climate, maybe not so much. Ecology, not so much. And so I can use these simple slider controls to set my priorities. And I'm going to say set priorities, and watch what happens. What happened here was it took my priorities and created a bar chart at the top here. And what it is showing is that as a developer team, commerce, industry, transport, housing, and groundwater is important to me. And these are the others that are. So then I can say sync with the decision model, and what it did essentially is, using these priorities, it changed the grid. So there is a starting position, and now for the development team, my grid looks a little bit different. What I'm going to then show you is how to add a diagram and edit a diagram. And first, let me just unsync my decision model so we get back to the starting position. Now, as you can see over here, I showed you earlier that you start with an empty grid of boxes. So as the project progresses, people add these diagrams. So some of them are added by the people who were in the workshop. To add a diagram, what you do is you click on this link here. It says add a diagram. And what it will say is ask you which requirement do you want to add it in. And in my case, I want to add it in the housing requirement. It will ask you for a brief description. Let's say Savannah housing. And there's a limited characters that you can place. It's just because of the screen size and the fact that you have to be brief, and it has to be understood by other people. And then you have to select if it is a project or a policy. You can also select if there is an existing diagram that you want to use in your diagram, you can select that, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. And then I'm going to set add a diagram. What it's going to do is it goes into the edit mode, and this is my Savannah housing diagram. You can obviously do the same, which is switch between the satellite and the existing land use. This is a much better visual of the shapefile. Now I'm switching to the base map, and I'm going to add a housing area, let's say near Garden City. So I'm going to hit edit, you see this menu. What I can also see is overlay the housing requirements and the constraints. So here we have a evaluation map that shows me where good areas for housing are. As Carl mentioned, the green ones need to be changed and the reds need to be kind of maintained or stayed away from. So it looks like this little green area is a good spot for housing. So I'm going to click add a polygon, and since it is a project, I'm going to hit project, and then I'm going to start doing this simple drafting of the polygon. And unfortunately housing is yellow, but you can see that's my housing area. Now I'm going to hit save. What happens next is essentially my diagram goes at the end of the housing grid, housing 14, as you can see, Savannah housing, and anybody else who's connected to the project sees this on their screen as well. So all of this is linked and all of the grid is live. So if you scroll back up here, there is a project updates where you can see the live updates. As you can see, I updated my preference for dev, added a new diagram, and then I edited housing 14. And this is the way to add a diagram. What you can also do is, let's say you make a mistake and you want to change it. So this is, I'm going back to my housing. I'm going to zoom in to where I want to see. And this polygon doesn't really look quite right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify it. So I hit edit, and then I say edit existing feature. And I'm just going to, let's say, do some fit and finish type work on this so it looks a bit more cleaner. I'm happy with what I have, and then I hit edit and I hit save. So it's in the same way you can edit polygons. The other way that we have tested as well is to essentially import external data. So if you have a GPX, WKTKML, or a GeoJSON file, you can import essentially this file and you have to specify if it is a project or a policy, and then you import it. So not only can you draft this using the drafting tools, you can also import external files with it. Now, the next step with this is, once you have a set of diagrams, usually you start to synthesize your design. And the way to do that is to then start individually selecting these diagrams as individual components to your design. If you hover over each of these squares, you can see the description of the diagram. So let's take a look at eCol 3. This is the Geechee Climate Adaptation Corridor, and eCol 1 is Green Infrastructure Corridor. So I kind of like these in my design. So I'm going to hit this checkbox that you're seeing to be added. And if I scroll down a little bit, these will be added over here, as you can see, and I can hover over them, and then this text over here changes, and you can see these two in my design. I can obviously add all the evaluation layers here as well. And on the left-hand side is my screen, and on the right-hand side is all the teammates' screens. So as you can see, Carl is the only person in the team right now, but this will fill up when you have others as well. Now, once you have a couple of diagrams selected, there are two things you can do. One is you can see the impact of them on your evaluation maps. So I'm going to hit update evaluations. Now, what this is going to do is, based on your selected designs, it's going to give updated evaluation maps. And as you can see, this happens fairly fast. What has happened here is essentially because we are doing an ecology kind of a selection. Let's take a look at the transport map. The transport map actually turned from red to dark red. So what it is saying is that it's kind of made this area unsuitable for any transportation development, and it kind of makes sense because we are proposing a climate adaptation corridor. So in this way, based on how you select your diagrams, the evaluation maps are updated. The second thing that you can do is do a really detailed impact analysis of these two selections. And to do that, you scroll down a little bit more, and then you hit show detailed impacts. And what it's going to do is do exactly the same thing that it did earlier, but along with a really detailed analysis as far as costs, areas, and impacts on every system is concerned. So it's going to take some time, and it's also going to take into consideration the constraints. So if you see my updated synthesis map, you can see it, the figure which started off as a just a blob. It took the constraints map, made it into an actual polygon, and then started to do an impact analysis on my project and policy. Obviously, like Carl said, policies don't have an impact assessment, but projects do. So you can see the impact of this project on each of the 10 systems, and in the purple yellow coloring scheme that we discussed earlier, and also a target achieved to this. So in this way, you create designs. The other thing that is new in the tool that we used very recently in Mulvaney is this notion of a timeline. As you add more projects and policies, these are added into a design timeline, and I'm actually zooming in and zooming out of it, as you can see. Now, what this is doing is that in my case, I have selected two ecology diagrams, and it's ecol 1 and ecol 3. What I can do is I can actually start to think about how do I stagger my project. So maybe I want the climate corridor first and then the green system. So I'm actually dragging this, and then I can also say something like, well, I want it to be continued till 2025. So now you can see I have actually started to start thinking about how do you sequence some of these projects and policies in time. So if I start adding others, so that's ecol 4, groundwater 1. So as you can see, this is the second way to add new projects and policies. Climate 1, climate 2, climate 6, and climate 2. So you can see my design being built over here, and my timeline being filled out. You can actually start moving these and say something like ecol 3 will start first, in the middle of ecol 3, ecol 4 will start, and then finally in the middle of ecol 4 I'll start my ecol 1 project. So you can start to think about which comes first, and this is very important when you start doing this kind of a dynamic analysis. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a simple design. So just bear with me while I do some selections. I'm just going to first clear out all my diagrams. Now I'm going to select transport 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 12. And then I'm going to select commerce industry 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 10. I'm going to select housing 2, 3, 4, 13. So 2, 3, 4, 13. Then agriculture, forestry 8 and 10, 8 and 10. And then tourism 1, 3, and 5. So this essentially is a way to start doing some of your designs. I'm going to, Carl has already selected a defensive landscape strategy. So essentially my plan is a property developer type plan. Now I can select Carl's name, and so this is the selections that Carl has made in this design, and I can do the following. I can say import all his diagrams. So I'm going to import them. It's going to take some time. And there we are. So these are the imports from Carl, and as you can see, my timeline is filled with the different imports. So I can start to play around with how these fit into the sequence. Now, once I'm satisfied with my design, I can actually say save design, and only conductors get this. And I'm going to name it, let's say, V2 or V1. And I'm going to hit save design. And what it's going to do is essentially save my selections and make it available for later use. Now, let's say in this case, you don't want certain projects and policies. So in our case, we don't want the development area west of I-95 or the commercial corridors. I can start removing them over here. As you can see, I've removed some commercial projects and policies. Maybe we can remove the port as well. Let me just do that. I think it's 3, 7, and 1. Now all I have is commerce 10, which is over here, and then I can do one more version saying, let's say version 2. And so we can very quickly create new versions for designs. Now what I'm going to show you is how you can compare some of these designs once they are created. Now I go back up and hit the compare page here, and what it's going to do is these are your change teams. Here you have version 1. I don't have the ecology plan here, but you can actually select between two different versions from the developer team, and it will give you an impact summary and the total cost and things like that. And there are other controls here which I'm not going to go, but what I want to do now is go deeper into two versions of the same plan. And so we are going to say a developer plan, and let's say V1, and then take a developer plan version 2. As you can see here, you have three types of overlays. You have a side-by-side, one on top of the other, and a before-after type overlay. As you can see, the first one had the commercial diagrams, and the second one did not. So you can see these over here. You can also start to do things like the following: show me only the climate plans, show me all the ecology ones, and then show me just the commercial ones. And so you can do these sort of detailed analysis for these two plans. You can also start to animate it. See here, that's plan A, plan B, plan A, plan B. As you can clearly see that the commercial area is different between the two of them. And then finally, you can do the simple overlays of these. And so once you have this, you can go a little bit deeper into each of these designs. And finally, if you go to this all synthesis versions page and you go to the developer plans, not only do you see all the plans in there, you have this option to download as a shapefile so that you can take all of this diagrams out and kind of go do much detailed analysis on them using your own models and tools. There is an API to this. So basically, if you have an API token, you can actually do all of this programmatically, and you don't even have to link into the tool or log in into it. Now, the other thing that we did not cover is the linking of external models that I showed you earlier. When these external models are linked, what happens essentially is a new row of grids is created here, which would be a dynamic external evaluation. And those are basically shown from your server into the grid here. And then it's the same for the impacts. So when you link an external impact model to it, what will happen is a new row will be added here at the bottom, which will be connected to your server, and it will show essentially the impacts from that server. And so the whole idea for all of this is to create a truly open system where you start off with an empty grid. Anything that you put in can be taken out, and any kind of geospatial server can be linked to aid in the design process or to do complex analysis. And we have some projects coming up where we will do this external linking as well. And that's really it from my side.